In the dim light of a candle, a young couple huddled together, whispering secrets and stealing kisses. The girl, barely 13, looked up at her lover with wide, hopeful eyes. She was a beauty with golden hair and a delicate face, but her life was far from the fairy tale she had always dreamed of. In the Middle Ages, love and marriage were often more about survival and economic necessity than about romance and passion. The stark reality of life in those times was harsh, and the stories we tell today about knights, damsels, and outlaws like Robin Hood are often romanticized to the point of being unrecognizable. A gravestone in Yorkshire bears an inscription that many believe confirms the existence of Robin Hood. This gravestone, however, tells us very little about the real Robin Hood. Most historians agree that if he existed, he was likely a common thief, not a noble bandit who stole from the rich to give to the poor. The idea that Robin Hood had a merry band of outlaws, including Maid Marian, Little John, and Friar Tuck, is almost certainly a product of folklore and imagination. These characters were probably invented to make the stories more exciting and appealing to the masses. While the legend of Robin Hood paints a picture of chivalry and justice, the real Middle Ages were filled with violence, poverty, and disease. Wealthy Europeans traveled in heavily armed caravans, knowing they were prime targets for thieves and bandits. The roads were dangerous, and even the most powerful lords were not safe from attack. The idea of a noble outlaw like Robin Hood, who protected the poor and fought against tyranny, is a romanticized notion that doesn't reflect the harsh realities of the time. Another legendary figure from the Middle Ages is the Pied Piper of Hamelin. According to the story, the piper was hired to rid the town of a rat infestation. After he successfully completed his task, the townspeople refused to pay him. In revenge, the piper lured 130 children away, and they were never seen again. While the story is often told as a fairy tale, the real events were far more sinister. The Pied Piper was likely a psychopath and pedophile who used the children for unspeakable acts. The aftermath of his crimes is shrouded in mystery, with some accounts suggesting that the children were found dismembered in the forest, while others claim they were never seen again. The Arthurian legends, popularized by Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, are another example of medieval folklore that has been romanticized over time. While there is some evidence that a historical figure named Arthur may have existed, the tales of his knights, including Sir Lancelot and Guinevere, are mostly fiction. Malory's work, while a masterpiece of literature, often depicts the moral complexities of the time. For example, he writes, "There Sir Launcelot took the fairest lady by the hand, and she was naked as a nettle." This suggests that the chivalry of the knights was often a facade, and their actions were not always noble. Marriage in the Middle Ages was often a pragmatic arrangement, rather than a union based on love. Girls were considered ready for marriage at the age of 12, and boys at 14. The economic implications of marriage were significant, and parents often arranged matches to benefit their families. If a girl was not married by the age of 21, she was considered a spinster, and was often sent to a nunnery or forced to work at home. The idea of romantic love was not as prevalent as it is today. Many marriages were arranged by parents, and the concept of falling in love was not the primary reason for getting married. Instead, marriages were often based on practical considerations such as land, wealth, and social status. Even if a couple did fall in love, it was not always enough to ensure a happy marriage. The challenges of daily life, including poverty, disease, and the constant threat of violence, often overshadowed any romantic feelings. Religion played a significant role in medieval society, and it often influenced marriage and family life. The Church taught that marriage was a sacred institution, and the sacrament of matrimony was taken very seriously. However, the reality was often different. Many young girls were forced into marriages against their will, and the Church's teachings on virginity and purity were often more idealistic than practical. Despite the Church's efforts to promote chastity, premarital sex was not uncommon. In fact, it was often a way for girls to ensure that they would get married. If a girl became pregnant, it was often seen as a sign that she was ready for marriage, and her family would arrange a match quickly to avoid scandal. This practice was not seen as morally wrong by many people at the time, as the primary goal was to ensure the continuation of the family line and the protection of the family's reputation. Literature of the Middle Ages, such as the works of Geoffrey Chaucer and William Langland, often portrayed a more realistic view of life than the romanticized tales of knights and outlaws. Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, for example, provides a glimpse into the lives of ordinary people, including their struggles, desires, and flaws. The characters in Chaucer's stories are often flawed and complex, and their relationships are not always based on love or idealism. Similarly, Langland's Piers Plowman offers a critical view of medieval society, including its corruption and inequality. The poem explores the themes of justice, morality, and the search for a better world. While these works are not as widely known as the Arthurian legends, they provide a more nuanced and realistic portrayal of life in the Middle Ages. The transition from arranged marriages to more modern, love-based unions was a gradual process that took place over several centuries. The Renaissance and the Enlightenment brought new ideas about individualism and personal freedom, which began to influence the way people thought about marriage. The concept of romantic love became more prominent, and the idea that a marriage should be based on mutual affection and respect gained more acceptance. However, even in the modern era, the economic and social aspects of marriage continue to play a significant role. The Industrial Revolution and the rise of the middle class brought new opportunities for women, and the concept of companionate marriage became more common. This type of marriage, based on mutual love and respect, was seen as a more fulfilling and satisfying alternative to the arranged marriages of the past. The Middle Ages were a time of great complexity and contradiction. While the legends of Robin Hood, the Pied Piper, and King Arthur have captured the imagination of generations, the reality of life was often harsh and unforgiving. Marriage, love, and family life were shaped by economic, social, and religious factors, and the concept of romantic love was not as prevalent as it is today. Despite the challenges of the time, people found ways to survive and thrive, and their stories continue to inspire and fascinate us. In the end, the Middle Ages were not a time of knights in shining armor and damsels in distress. They were a time of struggle, survival, and resilience. The stories we tell today are often romanticized, but they are also a reflection of the human desire for hope and redemption in a world that can be cruel and unforgiving. By understanding the real history of the Middle Ages, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity of the human experience and the enduring power of storytelling.